The Department of Public Health and Human Services is pleased to bring you Aging Horizons. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, fraud, legal issues, veterans benefits, and caregiving. Aging Horizons is a program dedicated to inform and prepare Montanans on these timely issues, making a difference to you and your loved ones. Here now is today's program host.
Hi folks, and welcome to Aging Horizons. On today's show, we'll be talking about Alzheimer's in Montana. There's approximately 22,000 individuals that have Alzheimer's, and of course that affects their caregivers, their family, and their friends. We'll be talking with the head of the public policy with Alzheimer's Association in Montana, where we will define it, and we'll show you some solutions that might be out there for you, so stay tuned.
45 years, 2 packs a day. That's like $80,000. I thought I was just hurting myself until I fell asleep in a chair with a cigarette. The whole house went up. I lost it all. I knew smoking was expensive, but I never thought it would cost me everything.
The human heart. Even at its strongest, it's a fragile muscle. Chest and arm pain, shortness of breath are signs of a heart under attack. But 3 numbers can save a life. Dial 911 at the first sign of a heart attack. Quick response from medical experts can save your life.
I was 45 and it happened to me, a heart attack.
Dialing 911 saved Ryan's life. Now he's here and he's healthy.
This message sponsored by Mission Lifeline Montana.
Every 65 seconds, someone is affected with Alzheimer's or other dementias. Many become isolated at a time when help is most needed. If you or someone you love is affected, help is available, both for people with memory loss and their caregivers. Memory loss can feel frightening, but you are not alone. Call the free 24/7 Alzheimer's Association helpline, 800-272-3900, for guidance and support.
This is Bill. He just received his new Medicare card and is following some simple rules to protect himself from fraud. He knows to never give out his Medicare, Social Security, or bank number over the phone. And this is Nancy. She knows that to detect any problems, she always reads her Medicare summary notice or Medicare Advantage EOB to make sure the billing is correct. Both Bill and Nancy know that anything suspicious can be reported to Montana SMP at 1-800-551-3191.
Welcome to Aging Horizons, which is brought to you by the Department of Public Health and Human Services. I'm your host, Brian Lamore, and as I mentioned, we'll be talking about Alzheimer's in Montana. Of course, we have a wonderful guest through technology here. We have Hannah Van Hoos. You're a public policy person with Alzheimer's Montana. Welcome to Aging Horizons.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, for our viewers, let's start at the top. Let's talk about Alzheimer's. Let's define that so we are coming from the same base of knowledge.
Yeah, so June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. So we're just trying to get out and talk to folks about what Alzheimer's and dementia are. So dementia is kind of that umbrella term that describes a group of symptoms that are caused by degenerative brain diseases. And they cause problems with thinking, memory, and behavior. So dementia is that catch-all term, and Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. But there are others, like Lewy body dementia and frontotemporal dementia.
Mm-hmm. And the Alzheimer's Association of Montana has been around for quite a while, I know. But what does the organization do in assisting individuals with this condition?
Yeah, so there are about 4 major things that we do, providing care and support, and also advocacy and supporting research to find treatments and cures. And so we provide a lot of services to families that are impacted by Alzheimer's dementia, and that's the care and support side of things. So there are 22,000 Montanans that we know of who have Alzheimer's. And there are another 51,000 Montanans who are providing unpaid care to them. So these are their friends and family who are taking care of them, in addition to any healthcare workers that are helping take care of them as well. And it's a growing problem. We expect there to be 27,000 Montanans with Alzheimer's by 2025. So that's a nearly 23% increase that we're expecting just in the next 5 years.
Wow, that's pretty serious. That's a big increase and a big problem. But now, how does the Alzheimer's make these services that you provide available on a local level? I imagine we have a telephone number, maybe a website. Then what's the next step?
Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about some of the ways to be aware about the importance of early detection and diagnosis for Alzheimer's and dementia. Mm-hmm. And so there are some steps you can take to ensure that if you think that you are seeing some things that are concerning to you, about how to get those addressed and see if it is Alzheimer's. And then we're here to help you throughout that process. Mm-hmm. And we do have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week helpline, and that's a 1-800 number. We provide education programs, which are being delivered online right now while we're social distancing. But when we're back to meeting in person, we offer those in person throughout the state. And those are things about like, what are the warning signs of Alzheimer's, how to communicate effectively with people with Alzheimer's or dementia, how to provide care to somebody if you're a dementia caregiver. We also offer support groups. Again, those are online right now, but we try to get back to having those in person again, both for people who have Alzheimer's and for their caregivers as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that individuals, they come up, they say, I might have Alzheimer's, or is it a family or loved one that notices it? And once you notice it, what maybe are your first steps to address it?
Yeah, so it's both. It can sometimes be a person themselves noticing like something's different, just noticing something different in the way that I'm remembering things or thinking about things. And sometimes it's family members or friends. You know, they know somebody well and they're starting to see signs that are new or different or just seem a little bit off. And so there's about 95% of older Americans say that they would want to know if they have Alzheimer's. But we found that at least half of people with the disease don't know that they have it. But there is a real value in knowing. I think sometimes people think that just because there's not a cure right now, there might not be anything I can do, so why do I need a diagnosis? But even though there is no cure right now, there are things that you can do to respond. And so it provides a real value for you and for your family and your friends. One example is that having that early and documented diagnosis of Alzheimer's can provide access to what treatments are available in some cases to slow the progression of the disease. And in other cases, there's a chance to have access to clinical trials to help us find more and better treatments and then eventually a cure. In addition to that, a big benefit of having that diagnosis if you do have Alzheimer's or dementia is the ability to engage in care planning with your caregivers and your doctors while you're still able to make decisions for yourself and communicate them clearly about what you want your health care to look like as the disease progresses and have those documented. And in the same vein, having that diagnosis early lets you engage in legal and financial planning so that your family and your caregivers will know who, for example, who you want helping you make money decisions as the disease progresses, things like that. And then lastly, there are some symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia that are similar to other causes that aren't Alzheimer's and dementia. So working through that diagnostic process can help rule out if it isn't Alzheimer's and dementia and figure out what else is going on.
Mm-hmm. But it's really important is that you don't self-diagnose. You need to go to a health professional, correct?
Yeah, so we'll talk through some of the ways that you can work with your doctors to get through that process. But yes, you can notice in yourself if something's changing in the way that you feel like your brain is working. But having that diagnosis of Alzheimer's is something that a medical professional will do and needs to do in order for you to be able to engage in those care planning and legal and financial planning things that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's not age specific or generalized, but part of Medicare is having a yearly assessment by your provider as to how you have changed over the prior year. And imagine this is an important point of that. Well, Hannah, we're drawn to a close on this segment so quickly. For our viewers, stay tuned. We'll be coming back with a lot more information, so stay tuned.
I
have so many questions about power of attorney.
Well, some powers of attorney are for finances and others are for healthcare decisions.
A power of attorney designates an agent who would make decisions on your behalf.
While making a power of attorney, you have the ability to control your agent's power.
You also have the ability to decide when that POA would take effect.
Wait, am I giving away all my rights?
Power of attorney isn't a license to make any decision for you, just those that you've specified.
Your agent should be somebody that's working in your best interest, but it should also be somebody that you would trust.
What if they try to abuse their power?
Protective measures like third-party accounting, secondary signatures, defined spending and gifting limits can help protect against financial exploitation. An agent's powers can always be limited by a customized power of attorney, and they can be revoked by you or the court if the power of attorney is abused.
So carefully drafted estate planning documents can help ensure that your finances are monitored, but not abused.
If you or someone you know is being exploited, please report to Aging Services Bureau at 844-277-9300 or the Legal Service Developer at 1-800-332-2272. This message sponsored by the DPHHS Aging Service Bureau.
I take care of my wife at home. When I found out training was available, I said, sign me up. It's made a huge difference.
When my husband was injured at work, it was life-altering. The classes taught me that it's okay to grieve, to ask for help, and to better cope as a caregiver.
My dad lives 4 hours away, and the Powerful Tools classes taught me that it's okay to ask for help. I highly recommend them.
To find out about this course for caregivers, go to powerfultoolsforcaregivers.org.
It's amazing the difference a little training can make.
Questions about Medicare and other types of insurance? Contact the State Health Insurance Assistance Program office to get answers to questions like, what is the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, and how do you decide if you need Medicare supplemental insurance? This insurance counseling program is not a sales program. It is available to provide answers to your insurance questions. For more information, call the State Health Insurance Assistance Program office at 1-800-332-2272.
Hi folks, welcome back to Aging Horizons. I'm your host Brian Lamore, and we're continuing our discussion about Alzheimer's in Montana, and importantly the Alzheimer's Association that's available to help you, your loved ones, anyone you know that has possibly dementia of some type. Rejoining us is Hannah Van Hoosier, the public policy person with Alzheimer's Montana. And Hannah, let's kind of start at the top. What are the actual warning signs of Alzheimer's versus maybe a person just being forgetful?
Yeah, so one of the questions we get asked frequently is, how do I tell the difference between what might be Alzheimer's or another form of dementia and what is just something that typically happens as I age? And so we have a list of a few different warning signs. And so I'll go into a few examples. One example of what could be a warning sign for Alzheimer's or dementia is disruptive memory loss. So forgetting important dates like major birthdays, or asking the same questions over and over again and forgetting that you asked them. And that's different from more typical aging, which would be occasionally forgetting a name or an appointment, but remembering it later. Mm-hmm. Another example of a warning sign of Alzheimer's or dementia would be challenges in planning. And so what that means is something like repeatedly being unable to follow a familiar recipe, something that you've made a lot before, but all of a sudden you're having trouble making it turn out right or figuring out what the next steps are in that recipe. And that's different from something like occasionally making an error when you're paying the bill, like sending in a check for the wrong amount or something like that. And that's more typical aging. Mm-hmm. Another example is difficulty completing familiar tasks. So something would be like if you're going to the grocery store that you go to every week and you've always gone to for years, and all of a sudden you have trouble finding your way there. You forget what turn to take to get there. That might be a sign that something like Alzheimer's or dementia might be going on. And that's different from more typical aging, which would be like occasionally needing help remembering how to record a TV show, for example, if that's not something that you do very frequently. Mm-hmm. With Alzheimer's and dementia, we also see confusion with time, and that can be like in a major way, like losing track of the season or the month. And in more typical aging, you might lose track of what day of the week it is, but be able to quickly remember, figure it out again. And then communication problems or changes in the way that you're able to communicate. So unusual or new trouble with words. So stopping in the middle of a conversation and not being able to regain your track of thought or figure out what the word is that you need to say next. And that's different than occasionally having trouble finding the right word, but being able to, kind of find your way around it and be able to keep that conversation going. And so that's just a few of the signs. There are 10 different warning signs, and you can go to our website at alz.org/10signs to get more detail about what those warning signs are and how they compare to more typical aging. So you can kind of compare what you're seeing either in yourself or in somebody that you love and figure out if it's something that might need some extra investigating.
Mm-hmm. And Hannah, in the past, it seemed that people would say the difference between Alzheimer's and maybe being forgetful is someone might put the dishes in the bathtub versus putting them in the sink, which is a really different behavior versus, forgetting the correct word to say at the right time. Is that kind of common?
Yeah, so something that we say about Alzheimer's and dementia is that if you've seen one case, you've seen one case. It presents very differently in different individuals. And that's part of what makes it challenging to diagnose and detect and why we're trying to talk a lot about it. So the biggest thing to keep in mind is that if it's something that seems new and kind of out of the blue, so if it's something that's really uncommon behavior that you're noticing in yourself or in others, or something that just seems like it kind of came out of nowhere, and then you're starting to see that happen in different ways, then that's something to keep an eye on.
Okay. Well, the importance of early discovery or diagnosis of Alzheimer's is the ability to start communicating. Communicate with your physician, maybe a healthcare team, spouse, family, friends. What are some of the first steps you take when you're learning to communicate and tell people maybe that you have Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so starting that conversation can be tough because Alzheimer's dementia is a tough thing to talk about. But people who notice cognitive decline in themselves or in their friends and families, and then doctors who might be worried about it in their patients, they all want to know what's happening and be able to know for sure, and then so they can know what to do next. But something that we found is that sometimes all these people seem to kind of be waiting for the other person to start that conversation. And so because everybody's waiting for the other person to start the conversation, it doesn't happen. Over half of people who are over the age of 45 and who are noticing cognitive decline in themselves have not talked about it with their doctors. That's kind of the extent of the problem. It's pretty widespread. And that's because these conversations are tough. But we have ideas and suggestions from our history and working with lots of families impacted by Alzheimer's dementia about how to start those conversations, how to bring it up. What questions do I need to ask? How do I do this in a way that isn't going to hurt somebody's feelings or scare my family or things like that? So we have ideas and suggestions about all of that. And we have suggestions from the perspective of if you're noticing these changes in yourself, if you're a family or a friend who are noticing these changes in somebody else, or if you're a doctor and wanting to know how to start that conversation with your parents. So we have resources for all of that. And you can find that on our website. And you can also call the 24/7 helpline that I mentioned and just talk to somebody who has experience in this and talk through how to start that conversation, what that conversation can look like, and figure out how to make a strategy for having that conversation. And then even if you just want to say like, hey, here are some of the things I thought might be warning signs. Can I talk through this with you so I can compare this individual experience with the experience of others? So
it's happened before.
You can call us at any time.
We've drawn to a close so quickly on this segment. Stay tuned. We'll have more information shortly.
I think the most pleasant surprise when we turned 65 and signed up for Medicare Part B was finding out about our Welcome to Medicare preventive visit.
It was free, and it gave us the opportunity to visit with our doctors and establish a plan for our health going forward.
They reviewed our medical history, measured our height, weight, blood pressure, and counseled us on other risk factors.
To learn more about Medicare's free or low-cost preventive and wellness benefits, call your local SHIP counselor at 800-551-3191. I mentioned it's free, right?
Twice.
Elder abuse is a growing problem, and it's happening right here in our Montana communities. At least 1 in 10 older adults are victims of physical or emotional abuse, financial exploitation, or neglect. To get help or report elder abuse, call your local area agency on aging or Adult Protective Services at 1-844-277-9300.
I was the last guy you'd expect to get diabetes. I was a competitive runner and I always took care of myself. So when I was diagnosed, it kind of threw me. But it's really encouraging to know I'm not alone with it. There are a lot of other people going through the same things as I am. It takes some effort. You have to keep after it. Exercise, meds, and diet are the key. But there are a lot of folks who want me to succeed. Diabetes is not the end of the world. With effort and attitude, you can have a normal life.
Gentlemen, this is a secure federal facility. Do you have your Montana Real IDs?
ID. I am Captain Lewis, and this is Captain Clark.
I'm sorry, I can't let you in.
Can't go into a federal facility, can't fly. Let's go back to the river.
Yes, we'll float home. Let me check the Google. What's a dam?
Discover more at mtrealid.gov.
Montana Real ID. It's the real me.
Welcome back to Aging Horizons. I'm your host, Brian Lamore. And we've mentioned we're talking about Alzheimer's with Hannah Van Hoos, your public policy person with Alzheimer's Montana. Well, Hannah, let's start with, is there a general age group that individuals start maybe seeing or experiencing Alzheimer's?
Yes, so the people who are at greatest risk of developing Alzheimer's or dementia are older people, so over age 65. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't affect younger people, because we do see instances where people develop Alzheimer's or another form of dementia in their 50s even, but it is more common in those older ages.
Mm-hmm. And, let's talk about the Medicare wellness assessment for individuals who are on Medicare. Is this a part of that review that you do yearly?
Yeah, so since the people who are most at risk of developing Alzheimer's or dementia are older and Medicare eligible, Medicare does cover the cost of some diagnostic tools to be able to determine whether you might have Alzheimer's or dementia. So one of the things you might be familiar with if you're on Medicare is the annual wellness visit. And that can and should include a test to detect possible cognitive impairment. And those signs of cognitive impairment are some of those warning signs that we talked about earlier that might be symptoms of Alzheimer's or dementia. And so these wellness visits you might also know as an annual exam, because they're similar to a checkup or a physical. And so anyone on Medicare is eligible for these wellness visits once per year with no deductibles or copays. And your doctor in these wellness visits can give you an assessment that detects that cognitive impairment. And it's recommended that older people get these assessments. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a patient and you're not sure whether you are getting the cognitive assessment, then you can ask your doctor about it. And then if you're a doctor and you're seeing somebody who's there for a Medicare wellness visit and you're not sure whether they want that cognitive assessment, you can ask. And so that's something we encourage people to do, again, to get that conversation started. Someone needs to go first, and it's always better to know than to be wondering. Mm-hmm. And so this assessment can come in a few different forms, but the most common form of this cognitive assessment is what's called the mini-cog. And that takes about 3 minutes, so it's a pretty quick test. And what it'll look like is you'll be read like a list of items and be asked to remember certain ones, or you'll be asked to draw the hands of the clock at a certain time. And so if providers are trained in giving these assessments, it can be very effective in determining if follow-up is needed. So that assessment in and of itself won't diagnose for sure whether you have Alzheimer's or dementia, but it's really good in figuring out, like, okay, these are the folks that might need some additional follow-up and additional investigation to see if it is Alzheimer's or dementia that's causing these flags on this test.
Yeah.
And so if healthcare providers are interested in finding out more about these assessments or accessing training, they can visit our website, alz.org/professionals, and we have a lot more information there.
Great. I was wondering, as one gets older, is there some cognitive decline that is a natural part of aging? You're not working, you're not thinking, you're not doing all these things. Do you just kind of have a natural decline?
Yeah, so changes in cognitive ability do happen naturally with age, but that's why it can be tough to sometimes know whether it's Alzheimer's or whether it's aging, and so that's why the warning signs that I mentioned are a good place to look.
Okay.
And then again, that if you really want to know for sure if those warning signs aren't necessarily enough, that's why that wellness visit can be really helpful, because that test that I mentioned can be another good way to flag whether it's a typical aging or not. Yeah. And these wellness visits can be done with whoever you see for primary care. So if it's your doctor or physician assistant or nurse practitioner, a lot of Montanans see physician assistants, nurse practitioners for their care. So they can provide these assessments too. Great. And you can bring your family members along. And so if they're your caregiver, or if they might become your caregiver, it's good to bring them along so that they're in the loop and that they know what's happening.
And is that care planning? Is that the first step for planning what will be happening with the individual?
Yeah, so once you get that diagnosis, if it is Alzheimer's or dementia, care planning is a really recommended first step. And so this is another benefit that's covered by Medicare. And it's care planning with your physician or your primary care provider and your caregivers. And so it just helps to make sure that all of you are on the same page about what your healthcare treatment looks like next, what it looks like going forward, and making sure that you get connected to any support services in your community that you might need. Another reason why care planning is really important is that 95% of people with dementia have another co-occurring condition. And a co-occurring condition, for example, can be something like diabetes. And so care planning can make sure that you have, real set of strategies in place to make sure that as Alzheimer's or dementia progresses, you're still able to manage that other condition like diabetes. Like if you need to take insulin every day, what do we do when it becomes harder to remember to take that insulin? So care planning can help address challenges like that.
Yeah.
And we found that it's really important just for preserving people's health. So people who receive dementia-specific care planning, they experience fewer hospitalizations, fewer visits to the emergency room, and better medication management. So that really helps you stay healthy and maintain a good quality of life if you have Alzheimer's dementia.
Okay.
But
Hannah,
care planning under Medicare is a new benefit, so a lot of people just don't know about it, so we're trying to get the word out.
Yeah. And Hannah, with the Alzheimer's Association, there's a lot of people that help out your objectives locally, statewide, nationally. Who are some of those people?
Yeah, so we're really grateful and thankful to work alongside some of our state partners. And that's the Montana State Alzheimer's and Dementia Work Group, DPHHS Office on Aging, and then the Montana Area Agencies on Aging. And then also we're in the last year of an Administration for Community Living grant that focuses on building dementia capability throughout the state. So this is federal funding that provides greater services and resources to families and people impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia. We're really grateful for that support.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and for our viewers, thank you for joining us.
Special thanks to the Department of Public Health and Human Services for their continued support. Hosts on Aging Horizons are program specialists at the Montana Office on Aging. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions. For more information about Aging Horizons, call the Department of Public Health and Human Services toll-free at 800-332-2272.